Now, I've seen some things firsthand at parties that were not normal. Uh, the kinds of drug use, not recreational cocaine, not marijuana, not pills. We're talking chrome.
Well, I had a fascinating conversation with Scotty Sachs yesterday about what really happens at Hollywood parties, at least some of the Hollywood parties, as well as who really controls the media narrative. Scotty has a deep background in the media, working behind the scenes. He currently has a radio show. There were a lot of really interesting stories he shared on my Uncensored Unified TV show, link in description. In one case, he talks about meeting with a news boss for CBS in Minneapolis and learning of a memo that came from a 3-letter agency.
I turned and said, Dave, it's just me. Tell me, where do those copy points come from? He said a 3-letter agency. Well, being naive, I said, does it begin with an F? He goes, no, it begins with a C, dummy. Get out of here. I went back into his office and said, let me see that. I was looking at a piece of paper with a CIA logo on it.
All right, this conversation with Scotty Sachs was enlightening to just kind of get a grasp if this whole blood thing in Hollywood is real. It's always been very hard for me to believe that anyone would do such a thing. But when you think of the party culture where you're not actually seeing what is done to a person to extract that, all you're seeing is the drug, and it's not called blood, it's called a fancy name, and you're not sure what you're taking. That sort of scenario, I can kind of wrap my mind around how someone could get into consuming such a horrible thing. So it was just interesting to have this conversation with Scotty Sachs. Here's part of the interview.
Now, I've seen some things firsthand at parties that were not normal. The kinds of drug use, not recreational cocaine, not marijuana, not pills. We're talking chrome. I'm sure you know about chrome. And that in and of itself is a Luciferian satanic ritual as to how they extract the blood and how they get that blood to drink it. It's a very Luciferian satanic practice. So
wow,
I didn't mean to dwell on.
You went to a party in Hollywood or where? And there was a drink.
Hollywood. I didn't believe it, so I had to follow up. You were a journalist. You were out investigating stories at one time, so I decided to put that hat on and investigate. I asked my friend who invited me to the party. I won't mention whose party it was. Corbin Burnson, L.A. Law. Corbin Burnson. Yeah, it was at his home, or he threw the party. He used somebody else's home to throw the party. I was invited because I was friends with one of the directors of L.A. Law. Her husband and I were close business associates. That's how I got invited to the party. So when I found out there was a room, and in this room, they had a room for everything. I mean, there was an orgy in one room. There was this and that and the other thing going on in rooms. I was there to watch. It was a Super Bowl party. I was there to watch the game. I was actually trying to watch the game. It was hard not to overhear the crazy conversations I was hearing. Hollywood celebs bragging about their exotic birds they had bought, their exotic cars, their exotic girlfriends. I mean, the braggadocio nature of the conversation was unbelievable to me. They were going so far as listing off how much they spent on everything, as if that was so important to everyone. But upon discovering this room where they were drinking chrome, I decided to follow up. I said to my contact, can you give me the name of the guy that you guys get, the supplier? Can I have the name of your supplier? Can I call your supplier to get my hands on chrome? Gave me the name. I met with the guy. I was wired. I was going to be bold and brave and do the thing you did with James O'Keefe. I was going to go down that road. At the 11th hour, I didn't feel safe at all with this guy. He was in my car in the front seat. We were in a parking lot in LA, inside, underground, and I just didn't feel safe. So I never recorded it. But he pulled out a vial, $1,800 vial about this big. Was enough for two people to enjoy, his own words. Two people can enjoy this.
Before we share more of the interview, thank you to the sponsor of my coverage, National Gold Group. The U.S. debt spike could ignite a long-term rally in gold. Since March of 2020, the U.S. has added another $8 trillion in debt, and gold is up 50%. Now, with the Fed raising rates, the interest payment on our debt has surpassed $1 trillion annually. BRICS nations met last month, and oil-rich nations Saudi Arabia and UAE have joined Russia, China, and India. 51% of Americans can't pay their credit card bills, which just surpassed $1 trillion for the first time in history. If this is Build Back Better, increased spending and regulation, it's likely to continue through 2024. Buying gold and silver is a strategic play that several countries are doing today. Who's looking out for the little guy when the government doesn't? Isn't it time you take a look at gold and silver now? Call America's own precious metals company, the National Gold Group, today. Mention my channel, Ivory Hecker, and you'll always get best-in-class service from America's conservative precious metals leader. National Gold Group has the IRA fee waiver program on qualifying rollovers. Call 888-617-5927. Get a free investor guide today. National Gold Group is a Consumer Affairs top-rated IRA dealer. Call 888-617-5927. And here's where Scotty gets into his conversation with this news director at CBS, who is allegedly being controlled when it came to covering some crime stories.
Over the years, I had heard about 4 a.m. talking points, that at 4 a.m. supposedly is when the CIA sent out the bullet points, the talking points for the day to the news media. Now, I didn't know if this was a real thing until 2013, when I actually saw the talking points at a CBS station. And there was an event. I'll call it George Floyd 1.0. There's a boy named Michael Brown, 2013. He was from Ferguson, Missouri. He had done a small-time drug deal, was stopped by the police. They ended up shooting and killing him, inexcusable under any circumstances. Police killing a criminal is not the way we want to live in a society, not the way you want to see or I want to see our society, but the police killed him. That's the narrative anyway from the media. I assume it's true that Michael Brown did die. He was shot by a cop. And the talking points from the media were the same as James Brown. Michael Brown was no longer selling drugs. He had been going to church. He found the Lord. He was a good kid, on and on. And when, in fact, the CBS station I was at, the program director and the news director, he wore, I don't know if you're aware, some of these guys wear a couple of hats. He was both programming and news. And he and I went to lunch. Our lives grew up together. So after doing business with CBS, I went to lunch with the programming news director. After lunch, this was 48 hours after Michael Brown was shot and killed. He had sent his best crew to Ferguson, Missouri to get the story. He had just watched the footage before we went to lunch. We come back from lunch. He's got a memorandum on his desk. He picks it up. He starts reading it. He starts swearing, God damn it. And he's like, oh, this is not good. This is not the story the way this is not what happened. I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, oh, this is a memorandum, what I'm supposed to say about the Ferguson. These are the copy points, the bullet points I have to use for the Ferguson, Missouri story. They're on a piece of paper he's holding. He said, hold on a minute. And he called his boss. He said, why did you approve a budget to send our best cameraman and our best reporter to Ferguson if you were going to make me use these bullshit copy points? His answer was, if I remember correctly, you have two boys to put through college. You'll use the copy points. You'll use the bullet points in the memorandum. And he hung up. So, of course, I want to know, where do these come from now? And I was pressing him hard. We had known each other 10 years. I figured he was going to tell me. He wouldn't let go of it. On the way out the door, I turned and said, Dave, it's just me. Tell me, where do those copy points come from? He said a 3-letter agency. Well, being naive, I said, does it begin with an F? He goes, no, it begins with a C, dummy. Get out of here. So I went back into his office and said, let me see that. I was looking at a piece of paper with a CIA logo on it that had 6 bullet points on it. I didn't have time to read them. He grabbed the paper pretty quickly. I saw 6 bullet points and a CIA logo. Does that tell you where the copy points come from for the story? That he was forced to run because his boss told him he got 2 boys to put through college. So does this sound familiar, Ivory? Any of this?
No, I never saw any directives from the CIA when I was.
No, I mean, does being told how to cover a story sound familiar?
Absolutely. For the record, having spent 9 years in corporate news, we never got a sniff of information that the CIA or any government agency may be controlling what we say. In fact, I was never taught about Operation Mockingbird. I didn't learn about CIA's Operation Mockingbird till after I left Fox in 2021. But I will say that when the pandemic started, there was some top-down control on what we could cover. Like we would go out and cover a story, and then the bosses would not let us air what the truth that we had collected on the ground because it differed from the national narrative. So someone at the top was controlling it, and I never got to the bottom of why the bosses in New York told my boss in Houston to fire me if I covered the truth again about certain topics. So it would make sense if the CIA was involved. It would make sense that they would get in close with someone at the top who then controls all the local bosses across the nation to control things that way. So it's just a lot of interesting stuff to ponder. I've never heard stories quite like this one from Scotty Sachs. Of course, the bosses would never want their reporters with our blabbermouths to know that they were being controlled, but maybe they let Scotty in on some things that they never let me in on because he was a behind the scenes guy. But anyway, full interview, you can check it out on Unified TV. Link down in my description for all my uncensored content there. Thank you so much for following, and subscribe to my YouTube for much more.